Hello, I'm Russell Sturgis. I'm the founder and principal of the Centre for Western Mindfulness. Welcome to the second instalment in the series of blogs that I'm doing in 2022 on forgiveness. In this blog, I'm talking about the idea of forgiveness as expressed through loving your enemies. These references that I'm going to be using over the next few months arise from the Sermon on the Mount, and in particular it's a series of statements that were about not resisting evil, and that the way that was achieved was through different forms of forgiveness, and I'm going to be looking at those. And loving your enemies, bless those that curse you, do good to those that hate you, etc., were examples of the way that this could be manifested as a reality. The word enemy comes from inimicus, in meaning not, and imicus slash amicus is about friend, and so it's about love your not friend, and if we just take the word amicus a little bit further, amicus relates to amare, which is to love. And so it could really be said that this particular model of forgiveness is to love that which is unloved. Now, I think that unloved is either subjective or objective, and I'm going to talk about that as I go through this. In more recent times, an enemy was somebody who either has or has the intention to attack. That really is how we sort of see somebody as an enemy. So this means that ultimately we are to love somebody who is going to, or who has, or is attacking us. Tall order. That's a really difficult one to come to terms with. And of course, the immediate context is, imagine being in the Ukraine right now and taking on this approach. Obviously, you'd feel justified in defending your home, your family, your nation. But this approach to forgiveness, as I said, was inspired from the Sermon on the Mount, and it was about this idea of resisting not evil. I get it if you find this really hard to grasp, given your own personal experiences, or when we see something like what's happening in the Ukraine at the moment. But I'd like you to at least just stop and listen to what I have to say in terms of entertaining the possibility that there's still something that can be done in these situations. Typically, our societies make heroes of our warriors and our soldiers, but there have been heroes of passive resistance too, and that includes Mahatma Gandhi in the way in which he was dealing with the British Empire, and in fact through his Satyagraha, which we'll talk about in a little bit, he was able to have India freed from the rule of the British Empire. And then we saw Martin Luther King in terms of the civil rights movement and the things that he was doing there, and he too was inspired by Gandhi and the writings of Tolstoy, and wanted to take that passive approach. However, Gandhi went a step further and stopped using the word passive resistance, and came up with this word Satyagraha, which interpreted means truth sort of used or enforced gently, and another word that he ended up using to describe it, or two words, was love force. So it was a force of love. In this context, there was peaceful resistance, with love being at the centre of one's attention. Now, we see lots and lots of people sort of do passive resistance stuff, but many times it's sustained or supported by anger and resentment and judgment, and that's counterintuitive to the whole idea of, particularly of what Mahatma Gandhi was suggesting, and I would suggest to you that what was being taught in the Sermon on the Mount. So what I want to do is to give you 10 things that you could look at that could help you to develop a consciousness of love force as it relates to being able to love your enemies. The first thing is to understand and believe in the power of love to heal. If you've never read any research around this or haven't done any reading around this, it may not be in your frame of reference to even consider that a loving consciousness has the ability to be able to bring about healing or a change. Can I suggest a book that I've had for many years and one that I think is worth reading is Love and Survival by Dean Ornish, because there's a whole lot of double-blind studies and a whole lot of medical research that was being done where people who were put into loving situations were able to experience healing. And it's worth reading. Dean Ornish is a heart specialist and professor of medicine, or certainly has been in the past, and really helps to give authenticity to this notion of the power of love to heal. Number 2 is understand and believe in the power of living mindfully as having the capacity to change reality. Now, living mindfully is to be the observer. That's literally what it is to live mindfully, is to be the observer. And so this is suggesting that the more you have the capacity to stay the witness or the observer, the greater the opportunity or the chance there is for reality to change. Now, once again, this is a quantum concept. I would highly suggest, if you want to learn a little bit more about this and from a quantum physics perspective, go onto YouTube and check out the double slit experiment, and where they were able to observe the changes in the behaviour of molecules when under observation versus when it wasn't under observation. It's quite interesting. But once again, believing in the power of being the observer to bring about change and transformation. Number 3, decide that inner peace is the thing that you value above all else. This is a real shift in values from unsustainable values, and the sorts of things that are unsustainable are wealth and power and romance and success. Those things can be here one day and gone the next. Peace is a choice, and doesn't matter what goes on, you can choose peace. A Course in Miracles claims that if peace is your priority, what you value most, then forgiveness is your only function. And so if you're choosing peace, then you're going to need to learn and understand the sorts of things that I'm talking about today in order to be able to be honouring of that in your choices. Number 4, develop the understanding such that you can see why an attack is a call for help. And a call for help is somebody really wanting to be loved. Once again, there's really only 2 motives for anything that we do. Either it's extending love or it's a call for help. And so if somebody's not extending love, then they're calling for help. And so when you can start to play with the notion that when somebody's in attack mode, it's actually somebody who's calling for help, it then helps to inspire a reference and framework in your own consciousness that begins to explore what's happening to this person differently. And one of the questions that I was trained to ask was to ask, what could this person tell me that would help me understand why they are the way they are? And that, in asking that question and in finding the answer, it's not then about judging. It's about just seeking to understand. And from that, recognizing that in that situation, they have no other option but to attack. The other thing about attack many times is when we resort to attack, for example, in a domestic situation, in a relationship situation, the reason that we're attacking is because we feel so bad about ourselves. If we can make somebody feel worse than us, then that helps us to feel a little bit better because we have no other means of being able to do it. So oftentimes an attack is to make somebody else feel worse because of the situation that we find ourselves in. Number 5, this is a big one. Understand that it is the child who is in control of the adult behaving badly. The Jesuits had a saying, "Give me a boy until he is 7 and I'll give you the man." This is the idea that by the age of 7, and some say now as early as 5, our programming is complete, other than our own life experience. But our programming is complete, and for most of us, that programming is based on us having a sense of being loveless, unlovable. And so we develop a whole lot of strategies in order to rise above our feeling loveless, unlovable. And one of the ways that we resort to doing that, as I just talked about a minute ago, is to go into attack mode. So one of the things that I'm suggesting to you is that when somebody's in an attack place, when they're angry, when they're projecting, when they're attacking, it's all about them. It's actually not about you. It's about something that has them feel loveless, unlovable, such that they can't treat you in a loving way. The only reason that they would treat somebody else in that way is because of their lack of love that they have for themselves. And most of that is a direct result of childhood programming. Number 6, you can use your thoughts and feelings to envelop your enemy in love, even from a safe distance. And obviously, safe distances are important in this. So in this particular situation, I used to do an exercise where I would imagine my heart filling with love, and I would see a stream of light coming out of my heart, and it would envelop this person, first of all, completely in like an egg of loving light, and then that would permeate into their heart as well. And I would spend some time sending them some loving light. And, excuse me. So this is something that is a really simple thing that can be done from a distance and can be done anytime. Anytime the person pops into your head, you, instead of judging them, instead of feeling angry, you have a choice. And you could extend loving light because you know that by you doing that, it's helping to maintain and sustain your own inner peace, which is, if you set that as a value, then you're able to honour that as something that you value. Number 7 is a little bit tougher. Recognise their role as your teacher. So part of the spiritual journey, and if that's the journey that you're on and if peace is your priority, is that there's 4 levels of love consciousness that we develop. We start off with social justice. So in the Beatitudes from the Sermon on the Mount, this was the 4th one that said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness." The 5th Beatitude are blessed are the merciful, and that's about forgiveness, and that's what we're talking about here. So in order for you to learn that, you need somebody that's going to be there pushing your buttons, who's going to present you with an opportunity to learn mercy and to learn to be forgiving. Of course, you can only then move on to the 3rd, which is pure in heart, and the 4th, which is peacemaker, which are the advanced levels of love. You can only move on to those if you've learnt how to apply mercy and social justice. And so, so when somebody turns up as an enemy, they're providing you with the opportunity to learn how to really integrate and own the 2nd degree of love in terms of allowing you to then qualify to move on to the 3rd and 4th degrees. And of course, based on what we understand, that being a peacemaker allows you to re-enter back into the kingdom of heaven based on that Christian model. But it's the highest state of love consciousness. Number 8, because you've been able to go to that place of finding the gift basically in them turning up as your enemy, the completion or the fulfilling of forgiveness and mercy is when you can move to a place of gratitude, where you're able to hold gratitude that this person presented themselves in a way that has allowed you to raise your consciousness. Now, one of the other side segues with this is that this person is a creation of God. It's a divine being. And ultimately, what they've done is lowered their vibration to act in this way so that you had the opportunity to take these lessons on board and to create a life that is love-centered. But it required somebody to turn up who isn't that. And that's principle number 9. Neale Donald Walsch, in Conversations with God, said, "In the absence of that which you are not, that which you are is not." So without there being cold, you can't know hot, and vice versa. Without sadness, you don't really appreciate happiness, and vice versa. And so having this duality gives us a much deeper understanding and appreciation of suffering and of peace. Which are the two that we're really referencing in this context. And so what this situation does is gives us a much deeper and profounder appreciation of peace. And of course, it helps to fuel the motivation to want to sustain that as a way of life. And so this is where that whole gratitude component gets to be really immersed in this situation. The last one, I want you to play with this one. And you know how when you dream, you're in the dream and everything is so real, and, you know, you're panicking, you're frightened, you're amorous, you're infatuated, whatever it is, you're fully in the experience and it's real for all intents and purposes. Everything about it is real until you wake up. And what happens? All of a sudden, your body's still sort of showing the symptoms, but you just realize it was just a dream. What if this is just a dream? What if what we're experiencing is just a dream, and there's a point where we wake up and we realize that none of it's real, that it feels like it, that we have that experience of it, but then there's a point where we go, do you know what? None of that was real. I was just dreaming. You know, in the Old Testament, in Genesis, it talks about Adam being put to sleep, and it never talks about Adam waking up. And I would suggest to you that we're Adam's still asleep, and that there's a point where we will wake up, and in that waking up, we will go, wow, thank goodness it was just a dream. And so in those moments where we're attacked, where we've been at worst case scenario, severely hurt or even murdered or those types of things, there's going to be a point where we wake up and we go, wow, thank goodness that was a dream. And I'm sure you've had dreams where you've been attacked or where you've been murdered in dreams, and then waking up realizing it was just a dream. These are examples of the way in which you can adopt Love Force. It's about planting seeds of love that bear fruits of mercy and kindness, humility, meekness, patience, inner peace and joy. Resistance and attacking back, is about planting seeds of justice and retribution, and that bears fruits of suffering. It's all about what we value. Unsustainable values like wealth, power, romance, success can always be impacted by external forces like enemies, including also, not that they're enemies, but they're a sort of a kind of natural justice, time and chance, things that happen to us. Sustainable values, as their name suggests, doesn't falter under external duress. Peace and choice and love are choices, not consequences, and as such have the capacity to be sustainable. So we can choose peace and love irrespective of what's going on around us. It's not going to impact on that. If peace and love is what you value most, then you will choose to love that which feels unloved. Thank you for listening, and look forward to telling you more about forgiveness and mercy in our next blog.